This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Hello and welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are live this week in the studio here in lovely Colorado. Last week in the show, we talked about we're coming up on our 13th anniversary of the show. We've been around for 13 years. And one of the things we're thinking about is what do we do as kind of a special celebration? The last time we really did any kind of a celebration was at show 100, which would have been in like 2007, maybe 2006. So it's been quite a while. So the team here is frantically trying to come up with some ideas. I invite you, if you've got an idea on what you think would be kind of a fun thing to do with you, the listeners. Many of you have been listening to the show since day one, March of 2005, but we're coming up here on 13, so we want to collect your ideas up. So think about a contest of some kind. So if you've got that, if you got an idea, this is your chance to practice some of those brainstorming ideas, and go ahead and send them in. Just drop me an email over at phil@killerinnovations.com. And that email address, you can reach out to me at any time. That comes directly to me. It does not get filtered by staff or producers of the show or anything like that. It comes directly to me. So please be kind. Don't flood the mailbox. But if you got questions on anything, and actually, since the last couple of shows, we took a little break from having guests on the show and just focused on answering your listener questions. So that's all been great from the standpoint of the questions that we've gotten in, and go back. I would encourage you to listen to those shows. This week, we're going to jump back in with a guest. So let me give you a little bit of background. In my day job, as you know, if you've been listening to the show, you know that I'm the CEO at Cable Labs, which is a research and development lab funded by, as an industry lab. We started a little while ago a subsidiary called UpRamp, which is UpRamp calls themselves a fiterator. Think about it as a graduate degree program of an accelerator. So designed for companies that have real product, real technology, real customers, real revenue, but who want to bring their products or technologies into an industry they don't serve today. So it's really about product market fit. So company already has the idea, but what would you need to do, or how would you go to market, or how would you enter into a completely different market than what you serve historically today? So today I've invited Andrew Skafel. Andrew is the CEO for Edgewater Wireless. It is one of the companies in UpRamp. To talk, we'll talk a little bit about accelerators and that type of thing, but I think both Andrew's story of his own background, but also kind of the story of Edgewater is interesting enough to talk about, the endurance of seeing, tough technology innovation efforts through some long hauls and some interesting challenges. So today's show is really meant to be motivational from the standpoint of stick with it, and it does work out at the other end if you have the endurance. So, hey, Andrew, thanks a lot for taking time out on your Sunday and joining us here on the show.
Thanks for having me, Phil.
So, Andrew and I did not know each other. I don't have direct day-to-day engagement with UpRamp. One of the team at Cable Labs runs UpRamp on for its activities. But I was asked to actually mentor Edgewater and the team, including Andrew and his team, as they went through the fiterator program at the company to kind of get them ready to think about this different industry segment to serve them. And it's interesting because my background is wireless. That's where I spent a big chunk of my career in the 80s and 90s was in wireless. So it was a little bit nice to get back in and get my propeller going here a little bit. But in reality, Andrew, you guys were already public and you already had kind of a early stage proven technology.
Exactly. We're a little bit different for going into an accelerator, but we've got the benefit of being a spinoff of a military company and got a bit of a pedigree there. But we're still very much an early stage company, in spite of being public as well.
Yeah, that having been an officer of publicly traded companies, that's a whole different challenge of trying to be an innovator and drive to the quarterly result problem, right? Don't get me on my soapbox. I get a little wound up on the how the quarterly result drivers actually can sometimes are not helpful to the long-term investment that need to be made. So give us a little bit of your background. Where did you grow up at? Edgewater's headquartered. You're in Ottawa, Canada, so you're north of the border. So now you get to listen to my Canadian joke, right? So when I run into senior executives from Canada, and we get to talking about U.S., Canada, and I have to remind people that, and it's a joke, so if you're in Canada, do not become offended. It's a joke. Right? But I said you have to keep in mind how Americans think of Canadian, or how to think of Canada. The way Americans think of Canada, some do, is the fact that they think of it as kind of America's attic. You kind of forget that it's up there. And then when you get up there, you're like, holy smokes. There's some great stuff up here, right? And you know two of the executives who I've told that story to, who both fortunately laughed, or it would have been
That's good.
It would have been really uncomfortable. But you're headquartered in Ottawa, Canada. Edgewater Technologies has been around since the late '80s, doing military work. So. But where did you come from before Edgewater? You kind of got an interesting pedigree.
Yeah, my background's a little bit different for someone in the technology space. My undergraduate's in politics and economics.
And we are not talking politics today.
And yes, and I've agreed not to talk politics today, so that's we'll save that. I initially started my career in a non-tech space. Did that for a very short period of time after graduating, and realized that it wasn't really for me. So I went back to school, and I did an Asia business program with the intent of living in Asia for a year. That went horribly sideways, and I was there for 10 years.
So hold it. It couldn't have been so terrible if you were. Was it Singapore? Were you in Singapore?
I was in Malaysia for 5.
You were in Malaysia.
Yeah, and then Hong Kong. Okay. And Malaysia at the time was going through a hyper growth period, bringing in a lot of international technology companies. And I ended up joining Newbridge Networks. I think I was hired number 1 or number 2 for the regional office, working with a lot of the large telcos as everything was growing. Newbridge was founded by Terry Matthews, or Sir Terry Matthews. It was then acquired by Alcatel. So I joined Alcatel for a while, and then made my way to Silicon Valley-based interwave communications, doing business development for GSM operators at the time. And my territory started out with a single customer and ended up being everything from Sri Lanka all the way up to the former Soviet Union. And like any good business development and salesperson, I believed in the product so much that they actually drank the Kool-Aid, and got together with some colleagues to start a GSM operator in northern Brazil. Probably one of the most challenging things that I did, but after doing that for a number of years, I thought it was time to grow up and come back to Canada, and ended up in Ottawa and joined a Terry Matthews-backed software company called Natural Convergence, and that was acquired by our largest customer, and from there ended up at Edgewater.
So it seems like the trend is you join a company, and then it gets acquired. Right?
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. I've never really thought of it that way.
Well, it's interesting because I built the Sapura network in Malaysia.
Really?
Yeah, and then I lived in Hong Kong. So it's interesting.
Oh, wow.
We both were in kind of similar spaces, and I actually did Telespa in Brazil. I built Telespa in Brazil.
Really?
Yeah, so that's my wireless background. So
Very small world.
you know, it is. It is incredibly small. So when we come back from a quick commercial break, we are going to pick up our conversation with Andrew here, get a little bit more about his background and lessons learned, and then we'll talk a little bit more about Edgewater Wireless. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the Biz Talk Radio Network, and we'll see you as soon as we get back on the other side of this quick commercial break.
Biz Talk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. This week we are having we have a guest here for the show today, Andrew Skafel, who is the president and CEO for Edgewater Wireless. It's a company that has been part of the first cohort at the UpRamp Federator. If you want more information about UpRamp Federator, you can just go to upramp.com, and actually all the information on all the 4 companies that were in the first cohort are there. You can get a little bit of background on Edgewater, but we were wrapping up in the first segment talking with Andrew about kind of his background, and I was teasing him a little bit about, you know, he's kind of got this built-in legacy that Andrew joins the company and then the company gets acquired. And believe me, I know the feeling. If you're in the tech field, or particularly if you're in the wireless field or networking space, you're going to get acquired at some point in the place. But one of the questions I wanted to ask Andrew was, if you look back, you shared in the first segment, you know, kind of your migration of your career. If you had to kind of attribute a few things to the success you've had in your career, what would they be? What would you kind of hang your hat on as kind of, you know, what contributed to your success?
You know, I think one of the things I was really lucky to have was to be surrounded by people who are smarter than me at all times, and you know, build a good network of mentors and people that you can bounce ideas off. You know, from that, learn as much as you possibly can about your customer base, and take a risk and try something.
So one of the challenges that I hear about a lot from listeners of the show is, you know, this whole issue of fear, right? The fear of taking the risk, or, you know, you're going to try something and it's going to just totally, you know, blow up in your face. But if I look back on your career, and even if I look at kind of Edgewater, it is the willingness to kind of stick with it over long periods of time, right? To not give in, right? So can you talk through, I mean, I had it in my career, but I'm interested in hearing from you. Is there some point back in your career where you thought about throwing the towel in on something and giving it up, but then persevered and it turned into be successful?
You know, I have trouble just picking one.
Believe me, I know that feeling.
The one thing no one really tells you is just how difficult some things are to really figure out what you do best. Like, you know, I even look at Edgewater. You know, when we first went to market, we really didn't understand what we did best. You know, didn't really understand what the technology could do, and it was really at the point in time where we went through a very difficult period, and our CTO rolled up his sleeves. He went and dug into our patents, into the FCC specs and the IEEE specs, and then we had a eureka moment, which was, hey, wait a minute, we actually have something. But that period of time of going from, the darkest depths to figuring out exactly what you have and how to bring that to market was a challenge. That was a real challenge.
Yeah, I think your point about we've all gone through it multiple times, and it's hard to pick one where, you're up against the wall and you're thinking about throwing the towel in. But, to really be successful in the innovation game, to be successful at taking raw ideas and molding them into successful products and then successful companies, endurance is one of those characteristics you just gotta have.
Exactly.
So in the case of Edgewater, when did you join Edgewater? What was kind of how long have you been there now?
It's probably been about 4 years. I joined what was once our parent company, Edgewater Computer Systems, on a short-term consulting gig, which of course went horribly wrong.
As I jokingly say, your prison sentence got extended.
Exactly. And my role became really getting the wireless technology spun off from the military business, and then getting that capitalized and really getting that business moving forward. So it's been almost 4 years now.
So then you were part of the team then that spun Edgewater Wireless out then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when we first launched, like I said, we didn't really know what we did best. And I'd say about a year and a half ago, we emerged from that deep dive understanding of the technology to say, you know what, it's fixing the problems of density and interference in wireless. And then we restructured the company to focus on that. And that really corresponded with the market dynamic.
Well, it's interesting because everybody talks about, hey, if I've got this really cool technology, this really big, innovation, and I'm inside of a larger company, I can just spin it out. And let me tell you, at Hewlett Packard, I can count on one hand the ones that were successful spin outs, because the attitude of inside of a large organization, the skill set inside of a large organization versus the skill set you need in a quote startup environment are radically different. But you've been successful at it, which is impressive.
It's interesting. And when I look back, I think cutting my teeth at Newbridge was a big company that was really a small company. Acted very much like a startup.
Yeah, I think that actually is a good point, because it is, when I look back to the ones that were successful, it was about a culture fit, right? So like a lot of people don't realize, Charlie Trimble, Trimble Navigation, the original GPS guys, all of that came out of HP Labs. Charlie worked at HP Labs. HP didn't want to go forward with the whole consumer GPS market, and Charlie left. But there's always was a very strong relationship between Trimble and Hewlett Packard. But it was about a culture fit. Versus you saw other ones, which is, either it was the individuals or the investors that funded that startup that just wasn't a good mesh. So and this gets back to, I guess, the proof point that it's not always about the idea. It's much more than just the fact that you get some patents or you've got some nucleus of an idea. It's also about your ability to be flexible and pivot. And in your case, digging deep to find out, okay, what do we got? And then how do you put that together to actually do something that the market wants? So we're going to come right back after this commercial break and continue the conversation. In the next segment, we're going to actually jump in deeper into Edgewater Wireless, learn more about what they are all about, what makes them unique, and you get to hear their pitch story. So stay right there. We're going to be right back after this commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are continuing our conversation with Andrew Skafel, who is the CEO at Edgewater Wireless. And Andrew, we've been talking a lot about your career and your background, but I want to hear more of the story about Edgewater. So why don't you just take a few minutes, give us the background on Edgewater and what it's about, and how you guys finally figured out what you had and turned it into a business.
So yeah, we're really a wireless innovation company focused on making Wi-Fi better. I know, Phil, I was in New York last week, sitting in a coffee shop, and you look around, there's so many people with devices. There's Wi-Fi absolutely everywhere. The coffee shop experience just doesn't work without Wi-Fi. The problem is people expect it to be everywhere, and more people are using it, more and more devices, more and more density. And what's happening is folks are deploying more access points and creating interference. And that interference is what makes the whole experience, frankly, stink. And that's really what we focused ourselves on fixing, is making that Wi-Fi experience better.
And so in this case, I think we've all experienced, right? Whether you're at the Starbucks and there's too many people on and you get this little trickle of access, or, we actually did a little test years ago, stood in front of the Apple Store on Fifth Avenue in New York, and we stopped counting at 225 access points viewable, standing at the front door of the Apple Store there on Fifth Avenue. It's just the density problem is, and there's just only so much spectrum that the government is allocated. So you're trying to fit 25 pounds of stuff into a 1 pound, bag or pipe. So okay, you've identified the problem. Now what?
So, for us, if you really look at the fundamentals of the problem, it's that limited amount of spectrum in a given space. So you really have to be efficient in how you address the spectrum. And the traditional architecture approach was, a single channel radio, drop as many as you can, create as much interference in that area as it happens. So what we did at Edgewater Wireless is we looked at the problem and we started with a clean slate. And we said, the fundamental issue facing wireless is the density of channels in a given area. More clients need more channels. So we innovated at the actual air interface, putting band-aids like software controllers on a single channel radio architecture. This is a fundamentally different approach.
So why didn't anybody else come up with this? This is always the interesting conversation on a show about innovation, right? Is when you hear it, you go, well, okay, that seems obvious. And then you go, if it's so obvious, why didn't somebody else do it before?
Exactly. And it is what we have is a very simple solution to a very complicated engineering problem. With radio frequency or RF, the more channels.
And it looks like we've temporarily lost Andrew out on his audio feed. So we're going to wait for him to come back here in just a second. But, one of the things I learned about Edgewater when I looked at their technology, and keep in mind, I've got a little bit of an inside scoop on this because of the fact that I've been mentoring them for quite some time. So I have a little bit of a look, and I've looked deep into the technology, and it really is about the fact that they have developed some fundamental intellectual properties that allow them to support multiple simultaneous transmissions of data in different frequencies. So as a result of that, then they can actually simultaneously transmit and receive and be as efficient as possible over a wider range of this RF spectrum. So as a result of that, We've had some great success. So Andrew is back again. Andrew, I was just filling in the listeners on a little bit about this approach that you took on this multi-channel kind of technology. So I'm going to let you pick it up from there.
So it's really a dramatically different approach to what's been done with the traditional architecture. And from an innovation perspective, it's a phenomenally challenging engineering issue that we're solving. All of this interference.
So it's one of those things where it sounds simple, right? The idea may be simple, but the implementation on this is the complexity factor can get really hairy really fast.
Exactly. So that gives us a nice barrier to entry, so to speak. That in our patent portfolio.
But I think this also plays into though when you're trying to do something a little, and when you're out there really trying to break new ground. What did the role of experimentation take? Right? Because you may have the idea. You guys are dealing with silicon, which is even more complex. But talk a little bit about the experience of the trial and error process of getting it right.
One of the process that we went through, once we understood what we had from a technology perspective, with this multi-channel architecture, it was really about getting the innovation to market, and the trial and error becomes, okay, this is a great thing, but how do you show people the technology? And the tipping point of the transition point for us was really getting things locked down into a repeatable demo. So we can actually go in and take, 10 clients, for example, pile them on a single channel radio, measure the throughput. Then we can do the same thing with ours. But getting to that point in time probably took us a year of really, really hard work, understanding the mathematics behind it all to actually implementing it.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm kind of in the Ronald Reagan camp of trust but verify. So and actually, when you and I first met and you came in and you kind of showed or talked us through what your technology was, right? And I've seen every variation of wireless in my entire life out there, right? So we got, if you recall that conversation, we kind of drew a line in the sand. It was kind of like, okay, prove it. And so we actually took the Edgewater technology and we put it inside of an anechoic chamber, which is basically a big Faraday cage, to test it and compare it head to head against existing access points that are in the market today, and you guys just smoked it.
Yeah, we were pretty excited to see that. Actually, it was the validation that you're always looking for with the technology.
Yeah, and it's always the hard part, right? People, it's too deep, it's too esoteric. People aren't going to understand it. But when you're talking about the performance improvement side by side against products that are in the market today, it's pretty eye-opening. But not eye-opening, it's eye-popping kind of performance, right? If you also recall that conversation, I was asking you, when can I get mine, for my house? I'm pretty sure you get that question every time you go through the demo process of showing your product.
We're still waiting for the PO, Phil.
Yeah, they'll keep waiting. The one benefit of owning a ranch is I have no Wi-Fi interference, because there's not another signal anywhere near my place here in Colorado. So now my place in Silicon Valley, that's a different story, completely different story. So we're gonna be taking off for another commercial break here in a little bit. But before we before we head out, I wanted to squeeze in one more little thing about the Edgewater. Where are you exactly in the process now? Or you're doing commercials or commercial deployments, POCs? Where are you at?
We're actually moving into a number of POCs in the cable space now. So it's a pretty exciting time for us, shifting from innovation to production and execution.
And that's always the fun part, right? Because now, life is good, and then you get customers. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you got to you deliver on the promises that you've been out there delivering. So we're gonna take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, I'm gonna ask Andrew to kind of share, given his, the arc of his career, if he were to look back and try to give advice to a 20-year-old version of himself, what advice would he give himself today compared to his experience going through his the entire career path? So stay right there. We're going to be right back. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We're picking up our conversation with Andrew Skafel, who is the president and CEO at Edgewater Wireless out of Ottawa, Canada. So, Andrew, you've lived international, you've been involved in a bunch of companies, you've been acquired by a lot of companies. When you look back on your career, what 2 or 3 pieces of advice would you give to a 20-year-old you based on all the learnings you've had over your career to this point?
Gosh, I still feel like I'm a 20-year-old me at times.
Well, our spouses will say that.
I think the biggest piece of advice I'd give a 20-year-old me is find mentors. Find people that you admire, whether it's in your space or it's in something completely different. And the wider that range of experience that you can draw on, the better. So find a mentor, take risks. You're 20 years old. That's what your 20s are for. Take a risk and explore, innovate, try things. Because I think that's what that's what your 20s are definitely for. You've got absolutely no liabilities, no mortgages, anything like that.
It's actually funny because I've had a couple of they're kids. I had a 9-year-old on the show who franchises lemonade business. He basically created this whole idea. His dad told him he had to launch a lemonade. He had to raise money because he wanted to buy, what was it? He's buying like an Xbox or a Sony PlayStation.
Right.
His dad said, okay, you raise half, you put together half, and I'll put together the other half. So for the summer, he started this lemonade stand, and he would go to farmers markets. Well, he blew way past the number that he needed for the Xbox. And then he actually created a business where he now franchises it and then uses it to teach kids how to calculate a profit and loss at the end of the day. So how much was your cost of goods? How much did you sell? Here's the P&L, and then he does a split with them. He gets half, they get half of the profit at the end of the day. And now he's franchising out into Detroit and all over the place, right? And I had another kid who was a sophomore in high school who did a medical device that actually returned the use of hands and arms for people who were paralyzed. And it was a science fair project his junior year in high school. He won 3rd place. He didn't win 1st place, right? But now, and his 3 other founders, their medical device companies are looking to commercialize it, and they're actually looking to do a gap year. They're going to skip the first year of college and see where this business takes them to. I'm sitting here going, what was I doing at 9? What was I doing at 16, 17 years old? I sure as I wasn't out, creating entire businesses. So your point about now's the time to get out there and take the risk is, man, if I was 20 again and I knew what I knew now, man, I'd be like all over being out there trying something crazy.
Oh, exactly.
It's it's an exciting time out there. So, now that you're a CEO, right? So, at Edgewater is the first time you stepped into the CEO chair, right? Right.
Exactly.
So what? Because then you and I can compare notes, right? I was a CEO of a very, very small little startup supercomputer company spinoff from the University of Illinois way back, but it's more of a little pseudo role than anything else. So Cable Labs is my first sitting in the CEO chair. What did you learn that was different coming from a role inside of an organization to sitting in the CEO chair?
Gosh, there's so many more variables and stakeholders, right, in a CEO's role, and you're always balancing out different interest groups, and at the end of the day, there are decisions to make that are your decisions. There's nobody else that is accountable for that except for you. That's the one. It's the one thing they don't really tell you about.
Yeah, because it's always when I was CTO at Hewlett Packard, there was always somebody, whether it was Carly or Mark Hurd or division leads or whatever. You always had somebody you could say, they just don't get it or whatever. And now you're the person who doesn't get it, right?
Exactly.
The CEO doesn't get it. He should be listening to me to go, do something crazy or wild or whatever it is.
The other side of that coin is, we've got some really great people on the team, and that's been the biggest learning experience for me, is finding the right people in the right roles at the right time, and making sure I'm not the barrier.
Well, that's been my thing was, I'm an innovation guy, right? And our organization's all about, we wake up every morning and our job is to invent the future. But I've had to learn that I can't really play the role in inventing that future. I've got 180 people, right? And the hardest part for me is not wanting to reach in and stick my fingers in, particularly when it's an area where I have, deep expertise or deep passion. That was one of my things I had to learn as a CEO, that sometimes you got to take a step back and let go.
And for us, being in the Cable Labs ecosystem is just it's amazing to see so much innovation at one place.
Yeah, it's a pretty unique. Cable Labs is a pretty unique organization from the standpoint of our history and how we all came about and what we're all about. So Andrew, really quick, if people want to follow you or follow Edgewater, where's the best place they can follow along and keep up with what you're doing?
At NextGen Wi-Fi on Twitter or at edgewaterwireless.com.
Perfect. So Andrew, thanks a lot for you joining us today, and appreciate you taking the time. For you listening to the show, check out the podcast. It'll come out on Tuesday. You can share it with your coworkers and others, and go ahead and subscribe. The one thing I would ask for you is if you could just take a few minutes, hop on over to iTunes, give us a review, post your comments over there. We read every one of them, and we use that feedback to hopefully adjust and improve the show. And show has been improved all the time over its 12-year history, and we're not standing still. We'll continue to work to improve it. So thank you for joining us this week. Check us out, killerinnovations.com, and we'll see you next Sunday right here live. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
The opinions you hear on Biz Talk Radio are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect those of this station, Biz Talk Radio, its management, or advertisers. The information on Biz Talk Radio does not constitute a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or service. If you have any questions about Biz Talk Radio, contact us at 817-274-1609 or at biztalkradio.com. Biz Talk Radio.
Autism. 1 out of every 68 children in America are impacted across every race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic group. If you aren't directly affected, someone you know is. Today's world doesn't support those on the autism spectrum. It needs hacking for us to truly welcome those who think and create differently than ourselves. We're hacking autism. a nonprofit charity with a mission to hack therapy, technologies, and career opportunities that improve the personal and professional lives of people on the autism spectrum. We believe that everyone can play a role in supporting those on the autism spectrum so that they can show their unique talents and abilities in this fast-paced world. You aren't powerless in this fight. Use your gifts and talents to make a positive impact. Join us in making a difference. Go to hackingautism.org to learn more.
Carpenters have their hammers and saws, chefs have their outfitted kitchens, and musicians have their instruments. A craftsman's ability to do their job is dependent on having the right tools. So where does an innovator, someone who takes an idea and makes it real, find the right tools to do their job? Outfit your innovator's garage by visiting innovation.tools. Innovation.tools is an online store created by innovators for innovators. It's where you will find tested and proven tools to help you create that next great product or service. These tools include books, audio training, video training, brainstorming how-tos, and much, much more. And for a limited time, listeners of Killer Innovations will get 25% off on your first order by using the discount code RADIO at checkout. And 100% of our profits from your purchases will be donated to charity. So go to innovation.tools and create that next great innovation.
Rwanda is a shining example of how the global community can come together and rebuild a country after a devastating genocide. But there is still more that needs to be done. In the rural villages, students are crowded into schools with no electricity, no running water, no internet access, and limited sanitation. Will these kids be ready to continue the rebuilding of Rwanda, or will they be dependent upon others? Through education and employment, boys and girls have an equally promising future that can transform their struggling communities. For $20 a month, a child can be educated and a community strengthened. By supporting Pioneer Education Africa, a 501c3 charity, you partner with others to provide education that will prepare a generation to take on the task of self-reliance. 100% of the proceeds received go directly to the education of the children. Visit pioneereducationafrica.com to find out more.